cultural genocide. What the fuck is it? What does it mean? Why is it not included in like the actual definition of genocide? Why is it so controversial? Let's learn a little bit together, okay? Um do 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 More than 2 decades ago, residential schools scholars such as James R. Miller and Indigenous leaders began to describe the efforts of the Canadian government to assimilate the Indigenous peoples through the residential schools and other related policies as cultural genocide, arguing that assimilation was intended to destroy the Indigenous peoples of Canada as a culturally distinct group. Other scholars, mostly outside Canada, have noted that the cultural destruction of a group is not defined in the UN Genocide Convention as genocide. Cultural genocide was in fact excluded from the final document because of the objections of colonial states such as Australia, the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and France. So, just really important note here. The only reason cultural genocide is not a component of genocide in like the definitional sense is because of the interventions of, again, Australia, the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and France. Largely, this is so that they can deny that they participated in this specific type of genocide. And I think that is worth noting for any future discussions of the topic. Nothing wrong with neo-feudalism. Change my mind. Feudalism bad. Boom. Cultural genocide, I've heard a lot, especially from right-wingers, crying about Western culture. I don't think anyone has ever actually explained what it is. I only have a vague understanding what it is. Should be. Neo-feudalism is cyberpunk dystopias. Corporations are nation-states. Yeah, I think that's bad. Yeah. So essentially, the part of this issue, right, is that because it's not in the official UN Genocide Convention, it does not include the aspect of cultural genocide. You can get away with a lot of shit to destroy a people that isn't technically trying to physically kill them. So let's take a look. Scholar Stephen Katz wrote about genocide in the specific context of the Holocaust and defined it narrowly as the intent to carry out unmediated, intended, complete physical eradication of every Jewish man, woman, and child. Separating the Holocaust as a unique atrocity, Katz went on to argue that it is this unconstrained, ideologically driven imperative that every Jew be murdered that distinguished the Holocaust from all prior anti-Semitism and to this date all subsequent, however inhumane, acts of collective violence. Scholar David MacDonald explains that Katz and others therefore exclude all other instances of genocide in world history, including the genocide of North America's indigenous peoples. Yet, for Raphael Lempkin, and for those of you who aren't familiar, Lempkin is literally the person who invented the term genocide. So maybe we should defer at least a little bit to the originator of the term. He coined the term genocide in his book Axis Rule in Occupied Europe. The cultural destruction of a group was as important as the physical annihilation of its members. According to Lempkin, the world represents only so much culture and intellectual vigor as are created by its component national groups. Essentially, the idea of a nation signifies constructive cooperation and original contributions based upon genuine traditions, genuine culture, and well-developed national psychology. The destruction of a nation, therefore, results in the loss of its future contribution to the world. Among the basic features which have marked progress in civilization are the respect and appreciation of the national characteristics and qualities contributed to world culture by different nations, characteristics and qualities which are not to be measured in terms of national power or wealth. So in 1946, when the newly founded United Nations began debating the creation of international agreement for the prevention and punishment of genocide, it accepted Lemkin's view. The UN General Assembly where these ideas were debated, then instructed one of its bodies to drop a draft of this international agreement for its next session. A subsequent draft, written by the United Nations Secretariat, defined cultural genocide as any deliberate act committed with the intention of destroying the language, religion, or culture of a group, such as, for example, prohibiting the use of the group's language or its schools or places of worship. But, as an international law expert William A. Shabas observes, the final version of Article 2 ended up being a much reduced version of the text prepared by the Secretariat experts. To this day, it does not mention cultural genocide. However, Shabas explains, the final version we have today includes an exception to this general rule, allowing forcible transfer of children from one group to another as a punishable act. In that sense, the Genocide Convention categorized forcible child transfers as cultural genocide. David MacDonald argues that Article 2E indeed brings the residential schools under the Genocide Convention without any need to alter its language. So, essentially, cultural genocide cultural genocide touches on a lot of these issues and topics. I mean, obviously, we would need to understand exactly where Lemkin's talking about when he's talking about culture. Culture itself is a rather nebulous concept, you know, like my neighborhood might have its own culture compared to the neighborhood that is a block away from me. You know, that could have its own culture as well, you know. So in order for culture to be like a useful term, it has to have limits placed upon it. It has to have different interpretations, different clear-cut things that we can then refer to as culture. Otherwise, culture itself becomes a meaningless term, which I think is why he's, in his quote, attributing it to nations, nation-states. Like, this is typically why, like, for example, like, you know, one of the terms for like indigenous peoples for a long time was like First Nations people, because for a long time Native American groups were called different nations, different cultures of individuals, people. Let's see. And it's also worth noting that, like, I mean, Raphael Lemkin was writing about this stuff in, like, the 1930s, 1940s. So, like, yeah, his definitions of, like, culture are going to be very different from someone who lives 90 years in the future, with, like, almost a century of additional research under their belts. Let's see. Would it be forced cultural assimilation to say the UK or French government to put lessons in their schools which have high Middle East / North African students that female genital mutilation is bad and not a practice people should be doing or society should allow? I think that if you are basing that off of like harm done to children, I think that's perfectly acceptable. Same way, by the way, I would say that it's fine to put that in schools if you're talking about male children. If you're talking about children who have penises, you know, maybe learning about how circumcision might not be the greatest thing ever would also be beneficial, you know. I don't consider these to be acts that erase their culture in the same way that like a residential school system where you're you know, stealing children away from their parents and forcing them to go to schools where they get beaten for speaking their native language. I think that these are very vastly different things. What was done to Indigenous Americans was most definitely cultural genocide. I agree with that 100%. Jameson1236, I appreciate your presence in my chat. I hope you have a fantastic day. And I also commend you for your enduring spark of hope for President Donald J. Trump, okay? Let's take a look here. Legality aside, why do so many activists and scholars now want to define forcible assimilation, as was carried out in residential schools, as genocide? Political correspondent Mary Agnes Welch writes, the idea of cultural genocide is particularly important for First Nations, Canadian First Nations, because few mass killings or instances of direct physical destruction occurred in Canadian history. But there are many cases of policies whose indirect intent was to destroy culture at the very least. First Nations would argue the upshot was the same, the end of them as a people. Tacking on the word culture somehow signals something that was less than real genocide. Instead, scholars are arguing that destroying a group's culture amounts to a genocide, plain and simple, with no need for a qualifier that softens the blow. Sociologist Andrew Woolford from the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg explains in an interview, if genocide should be understood as the destruction of group life rather than the lives within a group, then in the case of Canada's Indigenous peoples, that means understanding what makes them a group, what defines their cultural cohesion, such as a profound attachment to the land and nature. So, in Canada's colonial past, systematically depriving First Nations of access to their land so European pioneers could settle and railways could be built is genocidal. Andrew Woolford, Adam Muller, and others therefore argue that if genocide is the targeting of a group's existence as a group, that is its groupness, then all acts designed to affect the group's destruction, physical, cultural, political, economical, and otherwise, should be counted as genocidal. Let's see. Interesting. Wait, why? Wait, where does this go? Oh, gotcha. Howdy, a Nordnung 1943. Hello. I hope you're having a fantastic evening. Oh, it's all good. It's all good, Jameson. Don't worry. Let's take a look at some other reading. Let's take a look. What is culture, everybody? Let's take a look at the American Sociological Association. Sociology understands culture as the languages, customs, beliefs, rules, arts, knowledge, and collective identities and memories developed by members of all social groups that make their social environments meaningful. Sociologists study cultural meaning by exploring individual and group communication. Meaningfulness is expressed in social narratives, ideologies, practices, tastes, values, and norms, as well as in collective representations and social classifications. Sociology also studies the production, diffusion, reception, evaluation, and application of cultural meaning across institutions, organizations, and groups, including how cultures differentiate racial, ethnic, and class groups, and the role of culture in producing inequalities and group boundaries. So that's quite a mouthful. It's pretty broad, right? So like this kind of brings us back to what Kobe was saying in chat, right? Like, what is the difference between like a residential school where you are bringing children in to make this distinction, or rather to eliminate these cultural differences and replace it with like the predominant culture. And what is the difference between that and, for example, teaching that female genital mutilation is bad, right? I think that there are ways that you could construe the argument that like female genital mutilation is bad as a form of cultural like genocide, of like in some way infringing upon the cultural, I guess, rights of a certain group. That being said, I think that there are ways where there are times when I feel like this might be justified to like better the lives of people involved. For example, I think it's totally fine to intervene to stop people from mutilating kids. And I would apply that both to like the female genital mutilation, and also to like forcing children to have their penises circumcised. I think that these are things that like, yeah, I don't think they're great. I don't think they're great practices. So it's a problem. And I think that it's a tricky situation. You need to figure out where's the line, right? If someone has a cultural practice of like, well, it's our culture to rape our kids for them to become adults. Well, I think that we should protect the kids. I don't think that having the stance that like you can't rape kids is like something that is cultural genocide. I'm going to prioritize their health and well-being, allow them to make their own choices on these things. Yeah. And yeah, Kobe, I agree with that. I think that it tends to be a really touchy subject, especially in North America, where we've had a history of downplaying forced assimilation, or like a history of actually engaging in cultural genocide, like a systematic deconstruction with the goal of like eradicating a certain culture or group of people's culture. And that's I think people understandably get really, really pissed off about that, like that I feel like it would be a hard line to draw for a lot of Native American folk, because they've been personally impacted by these policies like their entire fucking existence, really. Um, Hate to leave on cultural genocide, but I have to go eat some food. Thanks for being a force. Always enjoy listening. I'm glad you enjoyed Snack Pack. Come back anytime, okay? Oh, I can wait. Can I move? I can move chat. This is great. All right, all right. Awesome, 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 awesome. I can now read without looking all the way over here. Awesome, sweet, cool. Um, I think there are ways to reform elements of culture that is bad or have done harm. We have done this in the past without pulling up residential schools on these cultures, but it would have to be done, in my opinion, a careful way, especially in these kinds of cultures, because of how white people have handled other cultures in the past. True, Ashley Stella. Like this is like one of those things where like, yeah, like I am by no means trying to be in a place where I'm telling other people what to do. I don't think I am in any way qualified for that. But just pointing out that like, yeah, this is a complicated issue, And I think that there's again a big difference between a school curriculum talking about female genital mutilation and contextualizing that practice and talking about it and educating about it. And I think there's a world of difference between that and like residential school systems systematically trying to wipe out a culture. Um, like by a very extremely stretched definition, I think you could make an argument that a school curriculum like that was engaging in cultural genocide, but I think that would be a tough sell for most people. Um, Hell yeah, Universal Discourse. Also, everyone go give Universal Discourse a follow. I can type in a command. There we go. This is what the right talks about when they say we care about the culture war. True. Awesome, Universal Discourse. Hope you're having a fantastic day. And I hope you got some sleep. You were up really late. Even though we see it as a small change, some countries allowing women to drive was a big step and a fairly massive change in culture. One example I could have thought of off the top of my head. True, Ashley Stella. True. Culture does change and reform over time, you know? Oh, no sleep? Oh, goodness, girl. Like, come on. I hope for your health that you get some sleep soon, okay? Do I support pop control? What is pop control? Population control? No? Wait, what is your argument for population control, Lavender Gunner? What why would you need to do such a thing, and B, for climate change? Wait, what are you talking about when you say you need population control for climate change? I want you to be specific. Yeah, Linky RD, I'm not surprised that they thought I was a market. They weren't impressed with a market socialist. Something similar to China's limit to kids, but again, Lavender Gunner, why do you need to limit kids because of climate change? Like I don't see the link here. What is the point you're trying to say? Yeah, overpopulation is a myth. It's not a thing. Oh yeah, I know what China's one child policy is. Also, hello, Revolt Rise. How are you doing, my friend? I hope you're having a fantastic evening, and I hope that you're well. Why isn't it a thing? Could you explain why it's a myth? I mean, sure. I mean, first off, right now the Earth, like we globally produce, I think 40% more food than we actually need. There's plenty of space on the planet. Overpopulation isn't like a thing. It's mostly logistical issues that we run into as a result of capitalism. Um, so like the overpopulation is just a myth. We haven't even gotten anywhere close to what like an overpopulated Earth would look like. Like here, let's take a quick look from science.org. All right. How many people can the Earth actually support? No surprise that as the world population continues to grow, the limits of essential global resources, such as potable water, fertile land, forests, and fisheries, are becoming more obvious. Let's see. So, yeah, it's most of these studies are saying that like the carrying capacity of Earth is like of humans is like somewhere over 8 billion, okay? Like a lot of these studies go up quite a ways. A lot of it is just limits of our logistical capabilities, not actually how much food we can like feasibly produce. We can produce enough food to feed everyone right now, and the world's population is somewhere around like 7 billion. So like yeah, we could it's not an issue. The issue is not population, but how we maintain our resources and planet. Many times we waste food, and many houses and apartment rooms are always vacant. If we handled shit better, we could take care of everyone right now. Exactly, Ashley Stella. That is why this channel's here to tell you that we can do fucking better than we're doing right now. Okay? SST Sharpie, thank you very much for hitting that follow button, friend. So yeah, and you know, by at least one estimate, you could have over 1 trillion people on this planet. So you know, there's a whole lot of variance when it comes to carrying capacity. I think it's pretty easy to say that the carrying capacity of the Earth is over 2 billion because we have like 7 billion people right now, and we're chugging along just fine. But we are projected to reach 9.8 billion by 2050 by the WHO. Well, again, I don't think that's an issue. Like, I genuinely don't think it's an issue. Let's see. Let's take a look at the... Good evening, Mighty Squatch. How are you doing? Let's see... Oh look, it's the Scientific American. Let's take a look at why Malthus is still wrong. Oh hey, we could also take a look at this too. Is by the Population Research Institute. The myth of overpopulation is an unfounded belief that the number of people on our Earth will exceed the carrying capacity of the planet in the foreseeable future, leading to economic or social collapse, and that actions ought to be taken to curb population growth. Where did this come from? 1798, an Anglican minister by the name of Thomas Malthus published the first edition of his essay, An Essay on the Principle of Population. So again, I want you to understand that, like, when you're referencing overpopulation, you're referencing a fucking 200 plus year old idea written by a minister saying that Earth would be overpopulated and that it's not actually like substantiated. Malthus falsely believed that population checks were necessary to prevent the proliferation of poverty and to prevent catastrophic war, famine, and epidemics caused by overpopulation, a phenomenon known as Malthusian catastrophe. Subsequent editions of Malthus's essay were widely read among the upper classes in Europe, many of whom bought into the false belief that high birth rates among the poor would overwhelm Western society and lead to war, famine, and poverty. Malthus' idea quickly became the foundation of a movement that began to preach population control and contraception as the keys to socioeconomic development and the betterment of Western society. Although Malthus himself generally opposed on religious grounds the use of birth control and abortion as methods of population control, his followers, the Neo-Malthusians, had no such concerns. So, let's take a look. Malthus's ideas quickly became the foundation for a movement that began to preach population control and contraception as the keys to socioeconomic development for the betterment of Western society. Governments today are pushing population control policies in order to control the number of children being born as a protective measure to their national resources. All of these policies have received global recognition of their brutality. Again, this is largely condemning the practice and beliefs of Malthus, okay? So when we're talking about overpopulation, it's not actually a thing. But it has had a lot of influence throughout history. And this is why a lot of the time when, like, this is, Lavender Gunner, this is why people were like, are you going to be talking about eugenics? Because Malthus's ideas on population selection inspired Charles Darwin to formulate the theory of evolution, which is good, and were highly influential on Francis Galton and the field of eugenics, which is widely bad. So, yeah. U.S. and UN foreign aid policies and structures still in place today were largely put in place during the 60s and 70s and influenced by neo-Malthusian theories, placing a heavy emphasis on reducing population growth in the developing world as a principal aim of foreign development assistance. Super normal, cool stuff. Let's talk about why this is bad science. Why Malthus makes for bad science policy. Oh, thank you, Linky RD. Maybe I'll get some shills in here, you know? Some shill reaping? That's a term. We need to be focusing on the subsidies for green energy if we give a shit rather than follow unscientific stuff. Exactly, Nick Bodog. L421 just came from a conservative channel that I got banned in. How are we doing tonight? We're having a normal one. We're talking about Malthusian economics and policies and why they're bad. If by fiat I had to identify the most consequential ideas in the history of science, good and bad, in the top 10 would be the 1798 Treatise, an essay on the principles of population, and English political economist Thomas Robert Malthus. On the positive side of the ledger, it inspired Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace to work out the mechanics of natural selection based on Malthus's observation that population tends to increase geometrically, whereas food reserves grow arithmetically. I think, yeah, I said that right. Good me. Good on me. I say words good. All right. Leading to competition for scarce resources and differential reproductive success, the driver of evolution. On the negative side of the ledger are policies derived from the belief in the inevitability of a Malthusian collapse. The power of population is so superior to the power of the earth to produce subsistence for man that premature death must in some shape or other visit the human race. Malthus gloomily predicted. His scenario influenced policymakers to embrace social Darwinism and eugenics, resulting in draconian measures to restrict particular populations' family size, including forced sterilizations. In his book, The Evolution of Everything, evolutionary biologist and journalist Matt Ridley sums up the policy succinctly. Better to be cruel than to be kind. The belief that those in power know best what was good for the vulnerable and weak led directly to the legal actions based on questionable Malthusian science. For example, the English Poor Law implemented by Queen Elizabeth I in 1601 to provide food to the poor was severely curtailed by the Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834 based on Malthusian reasoning that helping the poor only encourages them to have more children and thereby exacerbate poverty. The British government had a similar Malthusian attitude during the Irish potato famine of the 1840s. Ridley notes reasoning that famine, in the words of the Assistant Secretary to the Treasury Charles Trevelyan, was an effective mechanism for reducing surplus population. You'll note that this is also something that, oh gosh, what's his name? The Winston Churchill said about India, that they were dirty beasts and that the world was better off culling them from the herd. When he left them to die during one of the biggest famines of their history. For the record, just to go into a little bit more detail, there were actually grain ships that docked in India and got redirected explicitly by Winston Churchill away from a country experiencing famine on the off chance that some people might go hungry in the UK in like 5 years. He condemned millions to death through those actions. And it was okay in his mind because, why bother? A few decades later, Francis Galton advocated marriage between the fittest individuals. What nature does blindly, slowly, and ruthlessly, man may do providently, quickly, and kindly. Oh yeah, Churchill blamed them for reproducing like rabbits and took all the wheat because he needed it for the war effort. Pro tip, he didn't actually need it for the war effort. Yep. So then you had a whole bunch of people like Beatrice Webb, George Bernard Shaw, Havelock Ellis, and H.G. Wells, open champions of eugenics, which is very saddening to be reminded of by about H.G. Wells. Yeah. Ugh. We think of eugenics and forced sterilization as a right-wing Nazi program implemented in the 1930s Germany, yet as Princeton University economist Thomas Leonard documents in his book Illiberal Reformers, and former New York Times editor Adam Cohen reminds us in his book Imbeciles, eugenics forever swept America in the early 20th century, culminating in the 1927 Supreme Court case Buck v. Bell, in which the justices legalized sterilization of undesirable citizens. The court included prominent progressives Louis Brandeis and Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., the latter of whom famously ruled 3 generations of imbeciles are enough, the result, the sterilization of some 70,000 Americans. Yeah. Super cool. Just forcing people to have sterilizations because they were deemed too incompetent to have children. Malthusian sounds like some kind of H.P. Lovecraft villain or something. I mean, you're not wrong. It like this weird idea of like a Malthusian catastrophe and preventing like the overpopulation of the earth has like haunted the rich and powerful and convinced them to like massacre millions upon millions of people all across history since it became like widespread. Like, if that's not some sort of Lovecraftian horror, I don't know what is, Nice. This brings up eugenics was not started by Nazis like many people seem to think. Original eugenic researchers were American who brought it over to Germany. True. In fact, one of these days we'll have to have a sit down on the history of immigration in this country because, fun fact for all of you out there, the United States, we invented gas chambers. We invented the technology that the Germans used throughout the Holocaust, okay? Like, we invented it because Mexicans were dirty and needed to be cleaned when they were crossing the border in the most inhumane of ways. Let's see. Am I missing? Trans people are also forced to be sterilized in a fair number of places. True, like Japan. I had a relative few generations back who got sterilized because of that shit in the early 1900s. Never knew about them until my cousin, who was into family trees, discovered the info. Yep. Let's see. Pedo, career politician with dementia, Biden wins again. Woo, LMFAO. My dude, if you have evidence of Joe Biden being a pedophile, I highly encourage you to present that to the courts. I highly encourage you to bring that to the police. I would very much love to make sure that the president of the United States is not a pedophile. But if you don't have evidence of that, maybe you should shut the fuck up. All right, let's continue learning about Malthusian principles, because you know what, guys? This leads very nicely into our talk about Western civilization and how it's not good. If we're take these ideas as part of a unified whole that has influenced the rest of the world, these kinds of policies have literally killed millions, if not tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people. So one might even argue billions of people. Just gonna throw that out there, and I might do that later. It'll be fun. It'll be spicy. We can talk about it. All right. Oh no, what was the Chud saying? If you have evidence, shut the fuck up. We had no evidence on Epstein either until we did. It's obvious to everyone. We had evidence on Epstein. This is why he got arrested and charged, and then got arrested again. And maybe if we looked a little bit closer into that Epstein fellow, we might find his very close association with Donald Trump a bit troubling. You know, maybe find his shared love of young girls with Jeffrey Epstein troubling. But no, some awkward photos from Joe Biden is apparently the all the proof you need to show that there is a president level of pedophilia ring going on, run by the Democrats. Got to get those adrenochromes, you know. Is Universal Discourse still co-streaming? Maybe. You can go check them out if you want. Highly encourage you to check out Universal Discourse. Very smart person over there. Smart cookie, you know? Technically 1 billion is in the realm of millions. True. Thank you, Universal Discourse. Called you a cum villain? Wait, what? I got called a cum villain and I missed it? Oh, that's one of the best titles I've ever been given. I'm gonna embrace that. Fucking the cum villainess, you know? I have come for my cummies. You know, I just a sec. I need to process that title, the cum villain. My goodness, guys, we are memeing all day, all night. You know, Earth culture. We've got cum villainess. We've got all kinds of great titles. You know. Real lack of chuds tonight. I don't know. Is my Twitch 18 plus? I mean, I talk about all kinds of stuff. I was talking about genocide earlier. I don't know. I feel like, you know, people have a right to information. I'm not telling them to like go jerk off or anything. Cum villain was their last message. Oh my gosh. Also, I can't control what other people call me, okay? I can control what I call me, and I'm gonna call myself a cum villainess, okay? Goodness. Alright. The manga with villainess in the name are my jam. Sophia, I Ugh. Let's get an Arrow manga about me called the Cum Villainess. You know, I'd read that. Science writer Ronald Bailey tracks neo-Malthusians in his book *The End of Doom*, starting with Paul Ehrlich. Ehrlich, 1968 bestseller The Population Bomb, which proclaimed that the battle to feed all humanity is over. Many doomsayers followed. World Watch Institute founder Lester Brown, for example, declared in 1995, humanity's greatest challenge may soon be just making it to the next harvest. In a 2009 Scientific American article, he affirmed his rhetorical question, could food shortages bring down civilization? In a 2013 conference at the University of Vermont, Ehrlich assessed our chances of avoiding civilization collapsed at only 10%. The problem with Malthusians, Bailey writes, is that they cannot let go of the simple but clearly wrong idea that human beings are no different than a herd of deer when it comes to reproduction. Humans are thinking animals. We find solutions. Think Norman Borlaug and the Green Revolution. The result is the opposite of what Malthus predicted. The wealthiest nations with the greatest food security have the lowest fertility rates, whereas the most food-insecure countries have the highest fertility rates. The solution to overpopulation is not to force people to have fewer children. China's one-child policy showed the futility of that experiment. It is to raise the poorest nations out of poverty through democratic governance, free trade, access to birth control, giving them control over their means of production, maybe, and education and economic empowerment of women. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah, we don't see the U.S. population doubling every 5 years, you know. If I recall correctly, our carrying capacity right now is around 11 billion. Don't quote me on it. Yeah, I mean, like the question of carrying capacity is very widely debated. There are some people who say our current carrying capacity is over like 1 trillion right now. Or theoretically over 1 trillion. So there's like there's an element where like, yeah, maybe it's bigger or smaller, but like the fact remains that like we can find solutions to these problems, and every time we find a solution, it makes the carrying capacity of the Earth go up. Every time, you know, we invent a spacecraft that can travel to a different planet, you know, like, oh, we build a moon base, we start terraforming Mars, you know, the carrying capacity of the Earth starts mattering less and less, you know. Every time we come up with a green tech that allows us to get more, you know, fruits and veggies from the Earth, that's something that increases our carrying capacity. Every time we become more efficient with the way we use space, with our logistics, increases our carrying capacity. So yeah. Anything Anime On has ever called me, it's legit. I'm legit jealous. I love it. I love this very much. Chadbot01, thank you very much for hitting that follow button. I appreciate it immensely. But like this is why I think like the argument of like a carrying capacity for the Earth is largely like misguided. Again, like this article makes a really good point. If we want the birth rates to go down in the world, if we're really concerned with the carrying capacity of the Earth, well, maybe we should invest in other countries. Maybe we should work towards the betterment of our fellow human beings, you know? Regardless of what country or nation they're from, or what their culture is. People in poor regions might think children would help them make money, so they make more. They also depend on children to take care of them when they're old because there's no Medicaid for them. I mean, there's barely any Medicaid for people who get old in this country, you know? Like, holy shit. Hot take, I don't think communism will be viable until we're in space and fully developed across the stars. Linky, here's my hot take. I think if we go into space with capitalism still being our predominant way of doing economics, I think that we will find it increasingly difficult the more humanity spreads to change our ways. There are going to be country, planets, if we get to colonization, entire planets that we have to then work to try and change and turn away from capitalism. I'd rather get it done now while we're still on Earth and relatively not spread out. I think we should go into space with socialism, not capitalism. Agreed, Linky RD. Agreed. Socialism makes for a good stepping off point. I think that would probably make the most interesting space civilizations too. Like who knows where Mars might take socialism? Who knows where Europa might take socialism? The Red Army liberating the whole galaxy. Yeah, just have Mass Effect, but the Reapers are communists. Oh gosh, I don't like that analogy. Scrub that from my brain, please. Scrub it from my brain. Boo boo boo. So, the Mars trilogy by Kim Stanley Robinson is a good space communism story. Ooh, I'll have to check that out. Bleach on the way. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, so Sophie, that was a conversation I had with Dr. Heemed Out, actually, about like automation. And I mean, Dr. Heem kind of represents this faction of people who are fine with capitalism because they think that we'll get to a point where like wealth essentially becomes meaningless. So having a tiered society of capitalists and like a working class won't matter. But I think that they'll just keep us as a working class. Like I don't think there's like a reason for them to let go of that power and that position they have in society. Check your tags on Discord. Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no. I'm the cum villainess. Oh, gosh. Thank you. Thank you very much, friend. Speaking of, I got like a new dress during some of the Black Friday sales. I'm very excited about it. Um, Hopefully I can try it on after this stream. Let's see. Also, I learned that space colonization is not the best until we evolve past capitalism and imperialism via Gundam. Yeah, I mean, basically every space story that has ever had capitalism in space is like a dystopian hellhole, you know? Except maybe Star Wars? Maybe? Even then, Star Wars is like an awful hellhole to be poor in unless you're like on a decent planet that has like some good social systems. Because again, I guess in Star Wars, if you're born poor, you can be born into slavery and you're just fucked. So I don't know. Yeah, Star Wars is pretty dystopian now that I'm thinking about it some more. Um, we talked about why Gundam is so great. I love Gundam, but I think I need to give it another shot because like my only experience watching Gundam was on like TV in the 90s during the show where like each country had their own Gundam and they like fought each other to determine world policy. And there was one with like basically every Gundam was like a racial stereotype. That one was weird. I like the Mexican, like the the Gundam from Mexico literally had a sombrero on. It was Neo Mexico's Gundam literally had a sombrero. It was, I don't know how to respond to that as somebody who loves giant robots. Um Literally every time they try to do not do bad politics in Star Wars, they do bad politics and nobody stops slavery in the galaxy. So yeah, like honestly, Left Side Phil, what I want to see is someone being like, okay, fuck it, we're gonna make a Star Wars miniseries for Disney Plus. It's gonna be about a bunch of people rising up on Tatooine and overthrowing slavery. Okay, because fuck this, like that would be a cool ass story. Okay, the like a Spartacus type story from but set on Tatooine. I would watch the shit out of that, okay?